right, thank you, everybody, for joining us. Today is May 7th, 2024. We are here for the purposes of a school board meeting of the Salt Lake City School District Board of Education. We do have the need for a closed session, and I will entertain a motion from the board to enter closed executive session.
I can do that. Okay. I move that on May 7th, 2024, the board go into a closed executive session to discuss the character, professional competence, or physical or mental health of an individual, deployment of security personnel, devices, or systems, pending or reasonably imminent litigation, and collective bargaining.
Okay, is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
All right, we got a motion and a second. Is there any discussion to the motion? Seeing none, we'll start with a roll call vote with Vice President Williams.
Bryce Williams, yes.
Jenny Sika, yes.
Nate Salazar, yes.
Yes. Brian Jensen, yes.
Christy Sweat, yes.
All right, that motion passes. We'll go ahead and prepare the room. Thank you, board members.
And there she is.
Oh, perfect.
Are you
timing.
okay? Did you get pummeled?
Oh, you did?
Oh.
Looks like it's on a hailstorm.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
Your lanyard looks like a cancer. It does.
Oh, yeah.
It does.
Oh, she's my lanyard. Yeah. You want to ask a child to take a picture?
Oh, yeah. Do you want to do
You good?
Do you want to leave us in that?
Oh.
Okay.
Is there somebody else?
All right, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to go ahead and call our meeting to order. Thank you for your patience in letting us finish our closed executive session. And thank you for your engagement this evening and showing up in full force. We really appreciate your participation in that as well. Today is May 7th, 2024. We have just left a closed executive session and are ready to convene the open meeting of our public meeting tonight. The first opening item, obviously, is our welcome, and then our Pledge of Allegiance will be led by Christy Sweat. Thank you, Christy.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Christy, for leading us in that. And I also want to take just a couple of moments to recognize our association presidents this evening. For our classified association, we have Buildings and Grounds, President Aaliyah Ocampo. Child Nutrition is President Tanya Slaughter. Transportation is President Chris Krogh. For the Salt Lake Education Association, we have President James Tobler. I know I saw Mike Harmon. He might be in the back. And then the executive committee members from SLEA, and of course membership from SLEA tonight. Thank you for being here again. And then for our Salt Lake Association of School Administrators, we have President Bree De Leon, who is represented tonight by Dallin Miller. Dallin, thank you for joining us and representing SLASA this evening. Our third item on the opening items is a recognition. I'd like to invite Dr. Tiffany Hall up to introduce our first recognition, which is our USET Innovative Teacher of the Year.
Sally, are you here? I'm here.
Yeah. Crowd surfing. Let's go.
I would actually like to introduce Sally Warnicke. Sally Warnicke is our supervisor of digital learning, digital teaching and learning. She has brought a lot of innovative opportunities and ideas to our district, and I would love for her to introduce this recognition.
It is my pleasure to introduce to you our USET Innovative Teacher of the Year for Salt Lake City School District. This is Keenan Brown. Keenan's educational journey spanning across the U.S. has ignited his passion for technology-driven learning. His commitment started with a thorough exploration of the Microsoft Office suite, enabling him to craft interactive lessons. This passion continued as he moved to Salt Lake City, where he has consistently expanded his digital classroom year after year. A cornerstone of Keenan's approach is the complete digitization of assignments in Canvas. This ensures uninterrupted learning, even for absent students. He not only provides downloadable materials, but he also embeds files to prevent lost work, while features like student annotations allow direct document editing. Innovation extends beyond, with Keenan utilizing video platforms like Loom for modeling lessons and incorporating various applications like Nearpod and Newsela to enrich the learning experience. The positive impact is evident. Digitizing lessons prevents students from falling behind due to absences, potentially saving them from significant grade drops. Moreover, technology-aided reading tools within Canvas and other platforms have contributed to a rise in students' reading scores. Keenan's dedication to digital learning empowers his students and enhances their academic success. And it is my pleasure again to introduce to you Keenan Brown.
Keenan, if you please. Oh, and Keenan, will you pull the mic to you so that folks on YouTube can hear you?
I'm just grateful for the opportunity to be able to teach in Salt Lake City and to have the support of such a wonderful team of teachers, and to be in a district that values shared governance, and just to have these opportunities here.
Thank you. And oh, photo.
Oh, sorry. Usually people never tell me to come back to a mic.
Thank you,
Excellent. Keenan, thank you for all you do, and congratulations on the recognition tonight. Our next recognition, I'm going to invite James Yapias up to introduce and congratulate our 2025 Teacher of the Year.
All right. First of all, I want to take this opportunity to thank you, board members, for this wonderful recognition, and to the previous teacher that was here. On behalf of the Salt Lake Education Foundation and its board of directors, I want to recognize Ms. Sarah Posey, who is the Teacher of the Year for Salt Lake City School District. Let's give her a big round of applause. Just a little bit of background information. Our process this year, we had over 200 nominations. And out of the 200 nominations, we had 4 finalists, and Ms. Posey was one of them. And just to highlight some of the things that she has done, she has been able to teach 3-year-long history classes and 3-year-long ELP history classes at a Title I middle school, which we have our principal, Ms. Seminario, here. Provided differentiated instruction for students enrolled in her classes in multiple languages learned in her ESL classes. Participated in National History Day program with ELP U.S. History students attending both the 24 Salt Lake Regional Contest and 24 Utah State Contest. Created a scaffold research folded for students and hosted weekly after-school work sessions. Fundraised $1,000 in supplies for the students to complete exhibits. Achieved 91% pass rate on 24 Utah Civics exam, a state graduation requirement. So let's give a big round of applause for that. I could go on and on and on about her, and I have a list of accomplishments she has done. But I can tell you that this, Ms. Posey, you are an example of what we provide for our students in Salt Lake City School District. And so I would like to see if you could please say a couple of words. And once again, congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Y'all, I'm sorry I forgot to wear red. I look like a Christmas tree. Thank you guys so much for this opportunity. I'm like honored to be here. And I told all my students that it's not me that's awesome, it's my students that make me awesome. And if I didn't have the amazing students at Northwest to inspire me every single day and be excited to come to work, I wouldn't be here right now. So I'm really grateful for this opportunity. And thank you to all of you for every single day coming to school and inspiring kids who make school awesome because of you. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Posey, and congratulations, and thank you for being a representative of not only Northwest and all of your students, but for all of the teachers in this room and throughout our district. We have awesome teachers, and I'm really happy that you're representing us this year.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, moving on through our agenda, the next item is our consent agenda. I'll entertain a motion from the board.
I move to approve the consent agenda as posted.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second.
I'll second it.
Oh, we forgot the picture. Hold on one second, board member.
One thing to say. As a comment before.
Okay. All right, thank you, and congratulations again, Ms. Posey. So we have a motion on the table and a second. Any discussion? I know Board Member Anderson had something.
And I would too.
I just had one item of discussion on consent, which is the school financial reports. I just wanted to point out that you'll see the virtual elementary, it shows all their money was expended and thus transferred to schools where those pupils are, which means that as other schools close, we should see in the next year, those school financial reports will show that money following pupils. I've had questions about that, so I just wanted to point people to where they can find it and appreciate Alan for helping me understand. Thank you.
Christy?
First, I want to recognize that this week is Teacher Appreciation Week. Thank you to our teachers that are in the room tonight. I know that many of you, touch our kids' lives every single day, so I think that we should give them a round of applause for Teacher Appreciation. A former PTA president and school community council member, and also now a board member, I think it's important that we recognize that these school land trust funds, even though they're on our consent agenda, that the work and the amount of time that goes into it from the community, from the SICs, from the SCCs is important. It's important to me. It's important for me to read those plans, to attend those meetings, and to understand what's happening at our schools. Just because it's on our consent agenda doesn't mean that that each of us have not taken the time to look through those, listen to the discussions at our schools. It's important to know that those plans are they've been protected for so long, and as the money rises, through the great administration of those land trusts, that it benefits our kids every single day. And I just want to appreciate how much time and energy goes into those plans, and I recognize that, and I know the rest of my colleagues do too.
Thank you, Board Member Sweat. Any other discussion points? Board Member Bain.
As I always say, words are not enough to express what the teachers go through to make sure that our kids are learning well. You guys are the key that ignites the future leadership. Without you, this country will not be moving forward. And without you, schools will not be operating. It is a reality, Schools are like a big bus, and you guys are the motor. And, the principals are the wheels. I have no idea where we are. We are on top of the bus. Who knows, But I want to say again, thank you so much, because I appreciate teachers so much, because as a child, I'll never forget the effect of one teacher that opened her heart to welcome me in and comfort me at times of hard time. And that teacher will never be forgotten. She may not be here in the U.S., she's in Morocco, but she has left an effect in me. And so I want to say thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Bade. With no other comments, we'll start with a roll call vote with Board Member Sika.
Jenny Sika, yes.
Ashley Anderson, yes.
Nate Salazar, yes.
Mohammed, yes.
Brian Jensen, yes.
Christy Sweat, yes.
Bryce Williams, yes.
Excellent. That motion passes. Thank you, Board. Moving on to requests to speak. We do have a few speakers who have signed up for this evening, but first the Board has asked me to read some guidelines for our public comment, so I'll go ahead and start that now. The Board enjoys the opportunity to hear from the public during the comment portion of its meetings. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to remind you of our Board rules governing your comments. Number 1, the total time reserved for public comment is not to exceed 15 minutes, with all speakers or groups limited to 3 minutes. 2, the Board will not allow public comments during Board meetings that are slanderous, obscene, or otherwise violate state or federal law. 3, employees and/or their representatives may not use the public comment period to address issues that should be raised through existing formal communication channels or established grievance or negotiations procedures. I'd also like to explain that unless the speaker's topic is already on the agenda, state law prohibits the Board from taking action on items raised during the public comment period. However, if it seems appropriate to the circumstances, I may direct district staff to follow up with a speaker on the topic discussed. Our first speaker this evening is Julia Lyon. Julia.
Good evening. My name is Julia Lyon, and I am the Wasatch Elementary PTA Secretary and former SCC Chair. I'm happy to be back under different circumstances. First of all, we want to say how grateful we are for the opportunity to continue to grow the Wasatch Elementary community. More than 90 people volunteered at our annual art showcase last Friday, and hundreds of community members attended. On display was a collaborative art project done by Wasatch and Benyon students that will be permanently installed at Wasatch. Each student got to decorate their own ceramic star. The project was inspired by the children's book, Are Your Stars Like My Stars? And here are some photos of that beautiful art. I don't know if you guys want to look at that. There are many of these panels. So why are we here? Despite our optimism, we know that in a matter of years, our school will likely be back on the list of schools up for closure. We are the oldest elementary school in the Salt Lake City School District. In fact, our area of the city has several of the oldest schools, including the oldest middle school, Bryant Middle School. But we believe the district has an opportunity ahead, the bond. We realize it's early in the bond process. However, we know you have consultants studying the issue. Are they also studying the possibility of renovating or rebuilding schools other than the 2 high schools? What would the different bond rates be by including other schools such as Wasatch? And if this is not being considered, why not? One more thought. Has the district ever talked with the city about tapping federal ADA dollars to improve the Wasatch Tunnel? As you all know, we have an unusual campus. If that ADA money is not being discussed, why not? Buildings can be transformational. Bonds can be transformational. I hope the district's new administration building will inspire district leaders to do great things. As you move ahead, please think big and broadly and remember your oldest buildings, such as Wasatch Elementary, which will soon be 50 years old. We believe the time to think about how to keep an award-winning elementary school serving the Central City, University area, and lower avenues is now. We know the decisions that are made this fall will affect generations to come. Thanks.
Thank you, Julia. Our next speaker this evening is Laura Lincoln.
Hi.
Hi, Laura.
Thanks. Hi. I'm Laura Lincoln. I'm the vice chair of the Wasatch Elementary SCC. Just wanted to add my voice to Julia's to speak briefly about the school investment in the school physical buildings, physical plant. So as Julia mentioned, we recently had our art showcase, 90 volunteers. We put a ton of volunteer hours and dollars into the programs that we love at Wasatch Elementary, but all of those volunteer hours and dollars don't change the fact that the building is quite old and in need of repair and renovation. I haven't been to a board meeting in a little bit, so I took a spin through the minutes and the agendas from the last few months of meetings that I've missed. And I saw that there have been discussions about the capital projects list. There was a mention of how projects are developed and added to the list, although I couldn't actually find any information about that process itself. And then the list of capital projects for the 24-25 school year, which I took a look at, and I think what was striking to me was that there's substantial money, hundreds of thousands of dollars allocated to schools which are closing, and not very much money allocated to schools which are remaining open. So, there may be some context that I missed because I wasn't present at that board meeting, but regardless, I think it just sort of underscored for me that the district needs to continue to invest in the buildings which it has committed to keeping open, and to allocate funds in an appropriate way that means those buildings can be really reasonable for students and teachers and administration in the years to come.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you. Appreciate your time. Our third and final speaker this evening is President James Tobler. Don't worry, James, the applause won't count towards your 3 minutes.
Right? Thank you for the warm welcome. Yes, I'm James Tobler. I'm president of the Salt Lake Education Association and teach social studies at Highland High School. And wanted to speak to you this evening. We have lots of teachers here, and we want to recognize and celebrate the 50-year anniversary of shared governance in our district. Shared governance was implemented in Salt Lake City School District in 1974, and we have this proud tradition of collaboration and working together. And we want to strengthen shared governance into the future. Teachers are passionate about our students and student success, and we're passionate about collaboration. And we don't want less collaboration, we want more collaboration, we want more effective collaboration. We want to work with our administrators, we want to work with each other to improve student outcomes, to improve collaboration in our schools, PLCs, and we want to have a voice. And so we want to come here today and acknowledge shared governance in our district on this 50-year anniversary, and that we're passionate and motivated to work with district leadership and school administration to improve collaboration for student success. Thank you very much.
Thank you, James, for your remarks, and thank you again to all of your representation here tonight. It is awesome to see you all here, and congratulations to you and to all of us on that big, huge milestone and anniversary. Thank you so much for being here tonight. Moving into our reports agenda, the first item is the general fund budget executive summary. B.A. Kearsley.
Thank you. So there's two attachments to the agenda. First of all, I'm super glad everyone's here to watch my budget presentation.
Maybe we'll just take a minute to
We'll give it a bit, yeah.
simmer.
Alan, I'm here for it.
Thank you.
Really?
Right. So in previous meetings, as we've done various different budget pieces throughout the last several months, we've talked about different funds. As we're getting near the end of the budget process, we're going to talk about the granddaddy of all the funds, the general fund. As you can see on that slide, the purpose of the general fund is to account for revenues which are not required to be accounted for in any other fund. So this is kind of the catch-all, everything else. Next slide, Sam. A couple budget highlights for revenues. So the general fund budget has the certified tax rate as far as budgeted revenue. And if you remember, certified tax rate is a tax rate that generates the same amount of revenue as in previous years. We're also
The song, I just want to point out, all the precinct 3 teachers have stayed. So
hey, they know where the action is. It's in the budget discussion.
We also know what the elevator is. Now the real reason.
Hey, just go with me. It's budget.
Okay, it's all about you guys.
Thank you.
It's all about you guys. I love that. I love the honesty in this room right now. So great.
So, the legislature, as far as the property tax goes, they determine what the basic rate is, and the basic rate is what funds the weighted pupil unit. So as the amount of as that rate goes up or down, then the state portion, which is funded by income tax, goes up or down to generate that WPU. So for next year, we're budgeting for an increase in the basic rate, which is offset by a decrease in the state WPU funds, and you'll see that in the budget. In addition, there was a 5% increase in the weighted pupil unit. We're budgeting an increase in interest revenue. As you know, interest rates are up from what they've been in the previous years, but interest rates are also volatile, so interest is not a reliable ongoing source for things, but we are showing an increase for that for next year. We're also showing the end of ESSER funds. We can all have a moment of silence for that on September 30th, 2024. So you see kind of some significant decreases for next year in our federal revenue spending. Next slide, Sam. A couple expenditure highlights. We're budgeting for step, blame, and COLA salary increases. We're budgeting for a 10% increase in the health insurance premiums covered fully by the district. In addition, we're adding $1 million to the special education budget from the minimum school program to help cover the increased costs of providing those services for our special ed students. Next slide. Fund balance. So fund balance is kind of what we have left over. You know, it's our accumulation over the years of what's left over of what we received and what we didn't spend. On the budget sheet, there's an unassigned fund balance as zero. That's required by law. We have to budget that to zero. However, it's highly anticipated that we will have an unassigned fund balance at the end of the year due to conservative budgeting practices. You might ask, what's a conservative budgeting practices? Well, a lot of the stuff we're budgeting for, we're making estimates. So for revenue sources, we may estimate low. For expenditures, we may estimate a little high. So we know we're not going to get caught in a situation where we don't have enough money to meet our bills. That second point, so the reading achievement levy was a levy that was specifically for K through 3 reading. During the last legislative session, that requirement to have that separate levy went away. Last year, you probably don't remember, but we restricted those funds in the fund balance because it was a separate levy specifically for that purpose. Well, now that restriction has gone away, so that reading levy restriction will go away and it just falls down to regular fund balance. We also have a fund balance reserve that's committed for economic stabilization. It's set at 5% of the general fund budget, and that is the maximum allowed by law. So that 5% that we set aside for kind of emergencies can only then be used in the future through board action. Next slide. So in the general fund, we hear a lot of things called function. We kind of report things by function. This is just the definition of the functions. Instruction function, that's going to be our biggest function where we put the most money. So that includes student classroom costs, teachers, substitutes, textbooks, supplies, so things that are directly involved with the education of students. Then we have our support services instruction. So we have support services for students, which includes nurses, psychologists, counselors, student services, and planning. Then our instructional staff, so curriculum, teacher professional development, academic coaches, media centers, and testing. We have district administration, so that's Board of Education, Superintendent, Business Administrator. We have school administration, including principals, assistant principals, office staff, registrars, their office supplies. Central services, so that's finance, budget, human resources, legal services, and purchasing. So kind of the central business functions we have as a district. Operations and maintenance function is including utilities, custodial, maintenance, insurance, and property management. Student transportation is pretty self-explanatory. That's our buses, bus drivers, and field trips. Child nutrition, those that provide school lunch to our students. In the general fund, you're going to see that, and you might ask, well, wait, don't we have a child nutrition fund? So if you remember, we have 2 charter schools. Those 2 charter district-dependent charter schools are rolled into the general fund. As charter schools, they also serve lunch. So the function you see in the general fund of child nutrition is solely the pieces for those 2 charter schools, Open Classroom and SLCSD. Community services is our development office, our pre-K adult education. Those are community services and not instruction, because instruction is really K through 12. Pre-K is obviously before K, and adult education is obviously after 12. So that's why they're listed as a community service function. And then we have debt service. So debt service, you might say, wait, again, we have a debt service fund. Why is there debt service in the general fund? Well, thanks to the people back in Washington who think they need to tell us how to do accounting to make it easier to understand. There's a new GASB requirement, so when we buy a software license, often we're buying it for 5 years. So there's a new requirement that we have to show that it's debt service. It's kind of like we're paying on a loan, even though really what it is prepaid software licensing for the next 3-5 years, whatever the term of the agreement is. So that's kind of new in the general fund and unique for that. Next slide, Sam. Now I want you to all read these numbers. This is your eye test of the day. So this is, and I have handouts on this for you so you can actually see them. The first one is our general fund budget by function. So those functions we just went through. So this shows both actual for 2021 through 22-23, shows the 23-24, or that's current year budget, and it also shows the next year budget. There you see, I mean, in the 24-25 line, if you look at the very bottom, you see that unassigned is 0. That's when I talked about the unassigned fund balance by law has to go to 0. As you can see, our actual at the end of 23-24 unassigned was $18.9 million. Do I anticipate that we're going to blow through $18.9 million more than we have actually brought in as revenue? No, I do not. But sometimes you got to follow the law, right? So just note we're not going to spend that much money. You also have your operating transfers in and out there about the middle of the page. So that is our sustainability. So the sustainability projects were paid for in a capital fund, but the savings for sustainability utilities are in the general fund. So this transfer is those savings from the general fund over to the capital fund to pay that TELP loan that we incurred for phase 1 of sustainability. The next slide, Sam. So we've talked about functions, and then this next one is kind of the same information, but now we're grouped by object. So an object code is kind of what are we paying for at this point? So you see in the expenditure section, objects are salaries, benefits, professional and technical services, property services, other purchase services, supplies, equipment, debt service, and miscellaneous. So it's the same information, it's just grouped differently to, add more insight to what we're doing. Sam, go to the next slide. So this is a bar chart of our actual and then our budget. I'm going to have to turn to this one because I can't see that far over there. So the blue line is our revenue, orange line is our expenditures and transfers out, and then the bottom line is our fund balance. You can see in our actual columns, our revenues have usually been slightly greater than our expenditures, and that's what builds a fund balance. As we go into the budget for this year, next year, our budget is showing that we'll spend more than we actually bring in, so we'll be decreasing that fund balance. Some of that is planned, some of the expenditures we do, when you hear me say, well, we're going to pay for that with one-time fund balance, because it's kind of a one-time expense and then it's done, we're not committed to it. Like a salary, we're committed as long as we have that employee. So, I mean, that's why fund balance is great for some of these one-time issues that we need to address, because it's one and done, and then, because once that money is gone out of the fund balance, it doesn't come back unless we, have more money the next year. Sam, next slide. This is a pie chart which breaks down the functions. As you can see, 58.4% of our expenditures are in the instruction function. And then all the other pieces, the next biggest piece is operations and maintenance of school buildings. So again, our custodial, utilities, and so forth.
Let me borrow my computer so you can stay on the mic and not.
Thank you. You're just on the wrong chart. The third biggest is support services for instruction. So that's going to be our academic coaches, our curriculum people, kind of really helping the teachers with their supports. Next slide, Sam. So again, this is the chart representing that second set of data, so expenditures by object code. As you can see, 89.2% of our general fund budget is used up by salaries and benefits. So when we hit areas where, we need to cut budget, well, the vast majority of our budget is in people. So it's always important to note that. Second, supplies and materials, and then some of the other stuff is, those are pretty small slices out of the pie chart. Next slide, Sam. So some of our next steps, small group meetings. I know I've scheduled some small group meetings with some of you already. The rest of you, please look at your schedules. I've got Christy scheduled for tomorrow at 9, and I sent Brian an invite. If you can come that time, that'd be great. I got Bryce scheduled on Friday afternoon. If Friday afternoon or that, I can only have 3 at a time, so Christy's is almost full. If neither of those times work, just reach out to me, and I'm happy to meet with you on an individual basis, and we can either do that in person or online if that works best. On our next board meeting, we will review the entire budget. We won't go into super detail because we've already gone through a lot of the fund options, but kind of get the overall picture and discuss any further questions board members may have. Because on June 4th, it's anticipated that the board will approve both the revised current year budget, the proposed next year budget, and the proposed tax rates for next year. We'll also have a budget hearing on June 4th where the public is invited to come and give comments on the budget. Is there any questions on the general fund budget?
Christy and Ashley?
Thank you so much for this presentation, Alan. It's so appreciated by me. I think that sometimes budget's so big you don't know exactly where to hone in on, and to look at and ask questions. I think that it's important that if you wouldn't mind going back, Sam, to the expenditure budget highlights, to that slide.
One more. There.
Right there. So I think that, Alan, you always do a really great job on the delivery, but I think it's important for us to go back to this slide because there are 2 pieces here. Obviously 3 pieces. The step lane and COLA salary increases are very important, but that 10% increase in the health insurance premiums that we are absorbing as a district is huge when we look at recruiting and retaining our teachers. And so I always appreciate that because the increases just keep going up in health insurance. And so I think it's important for us to recognize that and acknowledge that, that's something that the district, purposefully does, for our employees. But the last bullet point, to me, is also something we need to highlight. When we talk about maintenance of effort and that we're taking $1 million and adding that into the special education budget, that's huge. And I think that we don't do that enough to talk about the amount of money that our district supplements into our education budget our special education budget because of the cuts that have happened at the federal and state level. And so I just want to recognize that we've never shied away from maintenance of effort, and here specifically in this bullet point, I appreciate that you're showing that because a lot of times we don't highlight that we're doing that. But $1 million is a lot of money that we've decided to do that specifically this year, along with the other times that we've put money into the special ed. So I want to acknowledge that with all of you. I think it's important that we recognize that and that we talk about that as we go forward in our budget. So just wanted to say thank you, and I appreciate the effort and the information that you have provided and look forward to that small group meeting tomorrow.
Thank you, Christy. Ashley?
Yes, I have two questions. The first is that when we look at the budget, we can see the pass-through that goes to charter schools in the area, not on this table, but just in general as you're making this. Is there a place, as the city council tonight is discussing further tax increment financed projects, that this budget all reflects the amount that's passing through our district to go to tax increment financing? For those new to the tax increment financing discussion, it means the city is capturing increment for development areas, some of which we agreed to be part of and some of which we did not agree to be part of. And so the question I'm asking is, where could a citizen, as we craft this budget, see that that $26 million in property tax is actually going somewhere else?
Right, so that is not included in the general fund. That's in a special revenue fund reported separately. We will cover that next board meeting. It's one of the funds we haven't covered yet. But yes, and you'll see that, it was 20 million last year. It's gone up to about $26 million current year. So that money keeps increasing, the amount of money that gets diverted that would otherwise come to the school district as in the matter of property tax growth. Instead, it gets diverted out to fund these projects of development now in the city. We'll cover it in more detail next board meeting.
Okay, perfect. I wanted to lay the groundwork because I knew it's being discussed tonight at the City Council, tax increment finance projects. But additionally, I'm hoping you can answer one more question, which is, we approved on consent the land trust plans. And again, I've seen all but one of the plans I reviewed are for academic intervention. And one of our asks as a board in statute is to look at if schools are funding the same thing year over year, or that if schools are all consistently funding the same thing, that we talk about how to include it in the general budget. So obviously staff is represented here, right? Like, we are funding academic intervention to some degree. But as we see schools requesting higher and higher amounts and using their land trust money for that purpose, is there anything that we can do as a board to consider how to better fund intervention in the general budget in the next cycle?
I think first, we as district leadership should work with our schools and figure out why is it they feel the need to use their land trust in that particular way, and then have a district-wide discussion of what can we do to provide that, and they can use their land trust funds for other enhancements. And then what we would do is come to the board through discussions of we would need whatever amount of revenue to bring this into the regular general fund, not the special land trust money, but whether it's property tax or WPU, to address the needs that all of our schools are looking at. So that's something that we will continue to review throughout the next year and have discussions with the board in future board meetings.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board?
And then there's a second attachment also to the agenda, and that is the executive summary. Now, not every page of the executive summary is updated. Because we're still working on it, and those areas are noted. And I don't want to really cover too much in the executive summary. I want you to take it home and read it, and feel free to read it before you go to bed, so you can. But what you're going to see in the executive summary a lot is it talks about governmental funds. So it's taking all these funds we've discussed from like February, March up till the general fund, and it rolls them all in together and kind of gives them total numbers. And again, next board meeting we'll discuss those numbers a little bit more in depth. But largely the executive summary both goes through all the governmental funds, and then I believe it also has general fund in it information, to just give a very high level review of what the budget is proposing. So please read through that. We can discuss it when you come in for some small group detailed discussions, and we'll also be able to respond to any questions you may have on both the May 21st meeting and also on the June 4th meeting if there's additional questions prior to an anticipated vote on the budget.
Thank you, Alex. All right, if there aren't any other discussion points for Alan on this report, we can move on to our next report, which is our school closure and boundary adjustment transition activities update. Dr. Grant?
I'll give that if you'll explain to April the piece that we need from your email there. Just a couple of things to note, and Jenny, do you mind handing those pictures from Wasatch? We're at the end of the school year. as Dr. Taylor said, there's only 3 Fridays left. So it is the end of, it's all the end of school activities that are in line now, the art show nights, the school field days and things. I just want to give a shout out, and I'm going to use Wasatch as the example because they brought these pictures of how they've brought 2 schools together into one activity. I have continued to hear over and over again about the work that teachers and administrators and family members and PTA presidents and SCC chairs are doing to bring these communities together and really welcome people. It is not always easy to put 2 different cultures in the same room again together to create a third kind of different one. And I just have all kinds of respect for our teams that are out there doing that right now and want to say thank you. That's a lot of what is happening just in these next 3 weeks is giving information to families about what's next, letting them know they need to register, they may have been assigned to a school, they still need to register and things, and we'll work on that communication through the summer as well. The other piece of this is they are finishing their safe walking routes. We've talked about this a few times, but those are almost done, more than half are completed and ready to be input into the Salt Lake City system, so then they can help provide crossing guards and things. So again, hats off to the teams that are doing it. And it's not just, I mean, it's the schools that are closing that have to manage the difficulty of ending that. But it's all the other schools whose boundaries have changed. There were 14 total there who have been welcoming new students in. So wanted to highlight that piece. Otherwise, what we're working on is getting teachers moved and getting the material in schools moved and boxed up. Teachers have boxes. Isaac Astle and his team have put together a moving plan for everybody that they label and number their boxes, and they'll be moved around to the new schools. And so all that is in the works for the coming weeks after school closes, of course. And we're covering teacher costs for those in the closed schools, a day at the end of the year and a day at the beginning of the year to cover some extra moving effort that they have to put in to reassemble their classroom somewhere else. In addition to that, we are planning on those 4 schools that are closing. We are going to put into those schools, after they have closed, small offices from the district who will be housed in those schools so that they are in use. And we have people coming and going in them during the day so that people know that those buildings are in use. We're going to have custodians, of course, in them as well. But that way they won't be empty buildings. They won't be dark. They won't lack activity. So a couple of the offices that are in Beardsley will be moved into those buildings as temporary office space into the next year and perhaps beyond as we work as a board to make determinations about the property. But the goal again has been not to have an empty space so that it's safe and well kept and the neighborhood can feel okay about those buildings too in their neighborhood. So any questions on any of that? Yeah.
As you raise the buildings, I think the follow-up question from the community would be, what is the timeline on that? So there's sort of this interim use that you're saying is going to happen. So what would be the timeline on discussing longer use strategies for those buildings? Would it relate to when the district office is complete, for instance?
No, I think we can get started right away. We've had some few discussions about immediate district needs. I've expressed to you an interest in a career and technical education center, perhaps, and there are other things we can use. We're going to create, our first step right now that I hope to complete in the next 6 weeks is the plan for stakeholder outreach around the use of those buildings. So we want to take in community input and ideas about how to use those buildings. what serves the community, because our interests, again, are in serving the district needs and in serving the community needs. So I hope in the next month and a half to have a plan for you to look at about what that information gathering and decision making would look like, and what the pros and cons are of what we can do with the buildings. There's a lot of work right now in the world around public asset management. This idea that governments own property that can be used in ways that bring in greater value to the entity. And so there are a lot of new ideas around the country about how governments are using parking lots, maybe getting rid of a parking lot or putting it underground and putting something on top of it that can generate revenue. There's lots of different ideas, so we want to be able to gather that menu of options for you as a board to see and to understand what those implications are, particularly financially and all, but also in terms of a use perspective and what best serves the district. So,
Dr. Grant, I appreciate you mentioning that, because I know in some of our previous discussions, like with the old Roslyn Heights property, I think we were collectively, really passionate about, is this a benefit use to our students and to our community? Will that also be something that carries on as we move into discussions and planning and stakeholder outreach about these 4 sites as well?
it is. I mean, in the policy, it talks about serving a district need as really the primary piece, and then serving a community need. So I think it's looking around at what our district needs are for space, because we'll have that space, and then working with the communities on what would best serve them.
Thank you. Brian?
Thank you, Dr. Grant, for that update. As I was looking at the end of the school year and knowing that you were going to be giving us an update, one of the things that came to my mind was teachers as they are ending the year and figuring out how they're going to take care of their classroom as they end the year, and then anticipating what they're going to be doing at the beginning of the next school year. I just wanted to make sure, and I think I'm understanding correctly, that you're providing 2 days for those teachers that are being moved because of closures or boundary changes or specific programs that are being moved. All of those teachers will, that are affected, will be provided a day as they're closing their rooms. I mean, it's challenging. It's a lot of work. And then there will be one as they open their classroom.
Yes, that's right. A lot of that work, so the bookshelves and desks and things will all be placed in there by the facilities team and moved out by the facilities team. So teachers need to pack up their own materials.
Right.
And then we've been working on cataloging curriculum to make sure it gets to the right place as students move around and things. So.
Okay, that was my next question, because that ends up being problematic as well, that, oh, this didn't come with, and I had anticipated. So we're taking care of all of that.
Yep.
Thank you.
I think the transition plan, Tiffany, is multiple pages of instructions on how to pack up and move and
have inventory sheets that list everything that should be together for each of the different curriculums, and so that we can go through those inventory sheets, make sure everything's in the box is labeled, off it goes.
Board Member Sweat?
Thank you so much for that update. I had the same kind of questions that Brian did, and I appreciate knowing that there is, a packet that you've got put together. I'm also wondering, Superintendent, within that plan that we have, do you think that there's any additional resources or money that we'd be able to provide to those teachers as they start to set up a new classroom? Because I think that that is also a challenge, in a new school, a new classroom.
To purchase new things
or to purchase new things, to
buying their time.
Right. I mean, I'm just wondering, if obviously taking your classroom, moving it to a new to a new space presents some challenges. And I think that one of the things I've always been appreciative of our district when we hired new teachers is we really pay attention to that. You know, how you set up your new classroom, what do you need, resources. And I'm just wondering if that's also a conversation that's being taken place, because it is, it's a change. And so it's nice to know that there's a plan, but is there also, resources that are built in to help them, as they set up that new classroom space?
Not specifically set aside for that. Each school does receive a healthy allocation of supply money. So hopefully these teachers will work with their principals to address their needs within the budget which we've allocated to the schools.
Thank you for saying that. And then also, I guess that would also include, like how DLI is moving and ELP, as you set up those areas, that I think that same consideration is probably taken into it. Okay, thank you.
Brian, I had Mohammed and then you.
Also, the art within the school. So I'm talking more like about students' art. What's going to happen with that? Is there any plan that it's going to move to where the majority of students are going? Because that's like, belongs to that school. That's going to be
Do you mean
closing.
more permanent student art, or
Yes.
the regular one every year student art?
More
on the walls?
permanent art.
Permanent student
Yeah.
art? I don't know that some of that is cataloged as district.
Yeah, no student art's really cataloged unless at times the district will have purchased some student art and then it becomes cataloged and part of the art collection. But I'd be curious to see what quote permanent student art is at those buildings. So we can look at that and determine what we want to do with it.
Yeah, because I think that would be great to, talk with the current principals of those schools, and they'll be able to help identify them, and also, give some directions of where it might be, best fit. And you guys know how many students are going to what school. And I think some kids are very attached to seeing certain art that they feel so comfortable seeing it. So anything that can be done to have some familiarity when they move into the new school, it would be fantastic.
Thank you, Mohammed. Brian?
Christy, I think, was getting to what my next question was going to be, and that as a teacher, when you're planning and you're doing your supplies, you have a certain amount that you receive for your classroom. And I'm wondering, will that money, because teachers try to use that wisely and use it for what they think is going to be the most beneficial in their classroom, will that money follow them?
Yes, I think you're talking about the legislative teacher supply money?
Yes.
Yes, so that will follow them, and not only will it follow them due to legislation, there's a bump to that, at least a one-year bump for next
Right.
year. So
That's a good thing.
So that's totally allocated to the classroom teacher, so wherever they go, that money goes with them.
Thank you, Brian. Any other questions for Dr. Grant on this discussion topic? All right, thank you for the discussion. We'll move on to our discussion agenda. The first topic there is the 2024-25 Weapon Detection System Staffing Contract. B.E. Kearsley, will you please introduce us?
So just to introduce the topic, so if you remember back in October, we began contracting with a company to provide the staffing for the weapons detector. Staffing means they stand there at the mornings and, when kids are coming in, and if it alerts, they go through the protocol to figure out why it alerted. Because it was determined that we didn't have enough internal staff to actually do that. It took quite a force. That was a one-year contract, so that expires the end of this year. So as we look forward to next year and what we want to do, we want to have the discussion of, what does that look like next year for staffing those weapons detectors it's at both our 3 comprehensive and at Horizonte are the schools which we have them at.
Yeah. And B.E. Kearsley, I know in our summary that is attached to the agenda that will also touch on points from HB 84 that was passed as well.
Yeah, so HB 84, it's sometimes called the school safety bill. One thing that we will discuss that it requires is that there is an armed security personnel at every school all the time. So one of the options you can do is contract with the company to provide that service. So it kind of goes hand in hand with this discussion. You know, if we're contracting with a company to provide the security service at the weapons detectors, do we also contract with a company to provide these soon-to-be required armed guards? Now, the timing of the armed guards, so what the bill says is first we have to do a safety assessment for every school. That safety assessment has to be completed by December 31st of 2024. Depending on the safety assessment, and then in conjunction with the state safety chief, we'll determine on the next steps on when those next steps of the safety bill have to roll out for each individual school.
Alan, I'll start with my question about that element of the safety assessment. So that is run through the state and not through a local jurisdiction, is that correct?
So the school district will run those safety assessments. Well, I'm sure we'll get guidance on exactly what we need to be looking at, but we'll run those. But it gets, General Counsel has something to say.
Kendall.
I was just going to say that those would be a school safety specialist working in conjunction with the county sheriff or their designee to do that safety assessment. So there is a component of an entity, an individual outside of us.
Yeah.
So it would be the county sheriff's department
Okay.
in conjunction with the LEA
Okay.
personnel at each school who would be doing that safety assessment.
That's good to know, because I know our city's police department has trained officers on how to run assessments like this for public spaces, and I just thought maybe that could be a suggestion, since this is something that it sounds like we have to do.
Yeah, we have to do it with the county sheriff's office.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? Board Member Bade?
So this is for all the schools across the district. Now, for high schools, we do have SROs. Do they still require to have someone?
Right. So if we could guarantee that there was an SRO in that school the entire school day, then that would meet the requirements. But as part of that safety assessment, which we'll do, that will help us determine how we comply with this part of the law at our high schools that already have SROs, generally stationed there, but sometimes they get called out for other police business.
Okay. Thank you.
Board Member Anderson?
I don't really have a question. I just have a comment, which is I'm just concerned about the absence of data about the efficacy of the detectors. Like, we have a lot of information about what schools have done. We have a lot of information about how people feel, but we haven't been presented with a lot of information about whether or not these tools work. And because we have a commitment to the B1 policy, which is to guard the public trust by spending funds to benefit all children, I'm worried that we're presented with a sunk cost fallacy where we're throwing good money after bad because the lease for the systems is ongoing, and so we feel compelled to staff them. And as you pointed out, at the same time we're being asked to continue a sunk cost and potentially a dangerous cost, the state legislature has asked us to spend millions more on bulletproof glass, panic buttons, and armed guardians in every school building in the district. And we're being asked to do this pretty much because state and federal lawmakers would rather we sink those costs than pass meaningful gun reform. So absent the willingness of state and federal policymakers, I really only want to support data-driven solutions, which in the school space are the threat assessment efforts we've begun with CSTAG. So in this case, regardless of how we all choose to proceed in the future, I also want to suggest that our staff continue to work with the city to increase the number of allocated SROs that we can hire, which has always been under the total in our MOU, and with district teams to double down on those CSTAG training efforts, which are the only evidence-based way that schools can reduce violence. I really think that as we move forward, I want to propose that we shouldn't make decisions based on what we believe about weapons detectors. We should make decisions based on evidence about weapons detectors. And I think a lot of school districts are phasing out their use, and we should really be presented with information about why school districts are phasing out their use and considering, its application to us, even though we've made this investment in the systems themselves.
Thank you, Board Member Anderson.
And let me just add to help the conversation. So we estimate, a year's contract is going to be, somewhere between 1.5, 1.175 million for the weapons detector staffing. Currently, we're using one-time fund balance. Remember, go back to see how it all ties in, my general fund discussion, how we have those fund balances. So we have fund balances to address this issue. We don't have ongoing resources, so at some point, if we choose to keep this, long term, we'll have to discuss ongoing resources. Currently, both current year and next year, we would be using one-time resources for this contract. And just throwing out a current estimate for the armed guards, again, if we were to contract that service out, I estimate that'll be just under $2 million to have an armed guard at every one of our schools. Now, that includes as if they were one at the high schools as well, which we may or may not need depending on the SRO situation. So, but that's just on an estimated price for an armed guard from a company that we'd hire for 8 hours a day at all of our schools, just under $2 million.
Can I just follow up on that quickly? That I just want to point out, as we're talking about this investment in special education of $1 million, and this ends up being double that amount for a thing that none of us want to do, but we have to do because it's a state policy now, I just think that should enter the conversation that this amount is much more than we're able to invest in these programs that we really care about. And it gives me pause about simply because the lease is longer for these systems, if we know these other growing costs are coming, and they are costs that are forced upon us that we wouldn't necessarily choose to enact as a board, I do think we need to think about the savings of this staffing in relationship to the big ask of what we have to do, whether we think it's evidence-based or we like it or not. And that is frustrating, but I think it's real.
Board Member Sweat?
I appreciate you asking about the efficacy. I really do, Ashley. I think that it's important that no matter where we spend our money, that we always have some accountability back. I think that's important, no matter what we do. Alan, I know that just from the conversations that we're having, and Superintendent, I would love for you maybe to touch on this a little bit, if you could. I was asked at a school community council meeting this morning about, what's the school district doing? And my answer was, we're still waiting for the rules. We're looking for, some guidance from the state office, how much money is going to be spent. And then one of the great teachers at Beacon Heights said this morning that there's a training that we have set up for information that we're going to be providing to the schools. Is that, a beginning training? Are we doing that? Something happening tomorrow?
I'm not familiar with the training.
Yeah, I wasn't really sure exactly what they were talking about, but there was, does that sound familiar? Is there something that's going on with teaching and learning or anything? Okay, well, so I'm not really sure.
Maybe that we are awaiting the state to create training for guardians in schools.
Right. So the
know if that's
questions
it
that
or
came up, and I don't even know if we can answer this at this point, Superintendent or Alan, is that when we say guardian or armed guard, who does that include and who does it exclude at the school site?
Yeah, let me answer that one, and General Counsel can correct me when I get off base. So the term guardian often is more reflective on a volunteer. One of the options is you get a community member who volunteers to come into the school, an employee who volunteers to carry a gun in the school and provide these safety services. So that's called the guardian. We can also comply with the law by hiring a contract security guard. Now, back to the employee. The employee can't be someone who interacts with, whose job is to instruct students and interact with students. So teachers, principals, parapros, they don't qualify for being a guardian. So really that leaves custodial staff and front office staff. You've got your child nutrition staff, but they're not there. They come in early to get breakfast ready, and then they leave before the end of the day, so they're really not an option. So you're looking at those two pools of your staff. There's some worry that, you might get some schools where you have someone in one of those two pools who's happy to do it, but other schools that, they don't have an employee in those two categories that's willing to be the designated person to to carry a gun in the school. So these are kind of the discussions we're having on, how do we implement this? A couple different ways, but we're still trying to decide the best way to go about that.
I think that what would be helpful is a fact sheet. So the first thing I'm going to do is correct myself is that it wasn't a teacher that said this morning. It was the vice principal, Brian Low Cashmere, who said that he thought that there was some training that was going to be happening and information that was going to be provided to administrators over this. So I think that
I will just say yes, we'll give some guidance
Yeah.
and some support to administrators through the leadership team as we figure out more and more what the bill means.
Right.
Everybody's still trying to interpret that, and we're waiting a lot on that state security chief who just started a
Right.
few months ago to lay out some of the pieces that we have to adhere to. So as we know more, we will provide that support, but from looking at the team here, it doesn't sound like we're
Well,
gonna
what
have
this,
a
I think,
document
I
right
think
now.
I may know what this training is. So every school right now currently has to have a designated security
yes, that's
person.
it. It was a designated
And-
security person.
And
That's
the
exactly what it
state's-
was.
The state office is
Yes.
doing some training.
That was exactly what it was.
Yep.
Thank you.
And I don't
See,
know
I
that-
knew we'd get to
yeah.
it.
That was good.
And I don't know if that training is directly related to this bill, other than just training they're supposed to have. There's a stipend for those that took on that role, and as part of that stipend, they have to attend these
So I think that
trainings.
what's really good about what you've just said is that although there was this thought that it might be connected, to actually say, well, it's training, but it's not actually directly connected to this. And so,
It is part of that
It is?
bill, because the bill changed who could serve in that role, because it
Okay.
used to be able to be an administrator, and now it's a different person, so.
Okay.
That changes in that bill, and so then so it is tied to this bill.
So it is tied to it, okay.
It's
So
tied,
may-
but probably not the sole purpose of
The sole
tomorrow's
purpose of it.
But it's,
Right.
but it's not tied to the guardian.
The guardian piece, which I think is also really confusing, because that was also a conversation that came up this morning of, who can be, who's the designated guardian, what does that look like? So Superintendent, I would just say that as we move through this at a coal tar rate, it feels like, that if we could get a frequently asked questions, put together an FAQ, I think that would be really helpful. I think whatever resources we're going to provide, and then definitions. I think, what does a guardian mean? Who can actually be a guardian? What does, because that's where the individual safes at the schools also came up. There was this idea that had to also be, at each of the schools. So I think that would just be helpful, for us, especially we're heading into the summer. We're thinking that this all has to be put in place by August. Is that right?
No,
Do you
there's some
know?
staggered
What's
timelines
the
on this.
There's staggered timelines?
As business administrator Kersley indicated, the needs assessment needs to be done by the end of December, and then that will drive the
okay.
school safety personnel discussion in terms of how many personnel we need to have at each school. And as Superintendent Grant indicated, the state security chief is coming up with rules to establish a timeline for when the film or bulletproof glass needs to be in place. I mean, we do have some timelines associated with
Okay.
those panic buttons and training that needs to occur for that piece, but there's so much that's going to depend on the rules that the state security chief makes. So we aren't even clear on necessarily the timelines yet in terms of, we know we have to do a safety assessment and have that done by the end of this calendar year, but
This calendar.
a lot
Don't
of other
yet know what it
pieces are gonna be
is, or
driven by
I think that's
state
so,
security chief rules.
I think that's so helpful to know even the timeline that you can put out to the schools, because right now everyone's thinking, oh, this is all going to happen over the summer and that it's all going to go in place, in August. So that's, I think that's excellent, to know what that timeline looks at, and then those pieces that have to come into play. So thank you.
Member Anderson?
I just wanted to add, as I see the incredulous faces about some of these asks, that just to reiterate, this is a state ask.
It is.
So the question I'm raising as a district board member is, can we, in good conscience, continue spending money on what I find to be an unproven system when we have all these other asks coming? I'm not weighing the reasonability of the asks. And I think that it's important as community members are listening and thinking, we have to what? Because not everyone is following the legislative session with their ear to the ground, like very aggressively, that this is a legislative issue, and it's helpful if you reach out additionally to representatives who did govern this choice, our state senators and our House of Representatives. So it's important to kind of note that we're not talking about the reasonability of having an armed guardian. We're talking about the reality that we are asked to have one. And to add a little more color to that situation, the reason why the guardian kind of policy portion was added was this idea that maybe rural schools couldn't have these contracts with police departments like an urban district could have. And so there's all these kind of interesting facets of that people could explore about why, what portions of the policy are intended for what kind of districts and why.
Thank you for the discussion. I think to kind of put some things into our perspective, we don't need to make a decision on this tonight, but I know timing is important for you, Alan, by the end of the school year. So we'll definitely continue to have this topic on our agenda. I thought we had a good discussion tonight, but we will, as a board, have a decision that needs to be made in the next meeting or two. So thank you. Please keep thinking about these elements. Community members, please continue to reach out to us as you're kind of observing and hearing things and kind of hearing elements of the legislation and how we're trying to couple these two elements, right, that of our decision that we have to make in the coming weeks. So, any other final points that folks would like to raise or discussion topics?
Yeah, I just want to clarify something so the public actually will be able to hear this. So the state is not giving us the money for these new asks. We are required to, is that what it is?
Right, so, no, so the bill allocated $100 million one time statewide for security. So as we do these security assessments, we'll be able to apply to get part of that $100 million. So I'll just say $100 million statewide doesn't go very far. And then once it's gone, and everything else is not funded, and it'll be up to individual LEAs to fund those.
Yeah, thank you.
Unless something changes next legislative session.
Good luck.
Thank you, Board. Thank you, Alan. We'll move on to our next topic on the discussion agenda, which is the draft board retreat topics. I'm going to hand those out. I think Bryce handed them around the other direction. Board members, what you have in front of you is an updated version of board retreat topics that includes what was posted on the agenda publicly, and then some additional topics that were provided to Bryce and I between when the meeting or the agenda was posted publicly and tonight. So really this is just Bryce's and mine's suggestion and work with you all to think about some of the topics. So these are topics that we generated between ourselves, and we appreciate folks weighing in on some additional topics as well that we could be talking about. The retreat is ours. It's our meeting. It's our retreat. It's also our agenda as well. So none of these topics that Bryce and I presented are set in stone. There are some that, as I've thought about it, we could consider moving off, obviously. But then we also wanted to hear from you all about if any of these topics resonate with what your board experience is like, or if there's other elements that you would like to bring into to a retreat like that, to this agenda. We're scheduled to have this retreat on Monday the 24th, starting at 5. It'll be a long night of June, of June 24th, from 5 to 10 is what it's scheduled at. But we're anticipating, about 4 hours for us to sit and have a little retreat with ourselves. That'll be open to the public, of course. So here's the possible topics and then some suggested topics. One thing I do want to correct is that 3A is actually a separate topic, and that was just a typo, so I apologize for that. And then item number 6 was really something that the administration had talked about with Bryce and I as well, that we wanted to present to you, just how we're utilizing our allocation, our resources, and where those resources could be going relative to the work that we do to benefit schools and students. So these are our topics. Are there any elements of discussion and questions, ideas, things that work, things that don't work, that you'd like to talk about? Brian?
One of the things that we talked about in our last board meeting was we went to that National School Board Association meeting, and there were lots of opportunities for us to participate in different presentations and lectures I think after we've made that effort and after we've expended those funds, that while this is something that's still on our minds, that we should be able to bring those things that we felt would be beneficial to consider in the operation of our district. I think that that would be really valuable.
Excellent. Thank you, Brian. We do remember that. I'm sorry we didn't put it on this list. Board Member Bade?
It would be one thing, addressing the elephant in the room, and that is school closures and the, what the space usage, basically, and possibly also, it's never too late to think about when are we going to be thinking about, next round of schools, there's going to be in list. What is the process going to be like? Things like that. So this is like a big topic, but it'll be like around school closures and the process and, how are we going to go about it?
I appreciate that, Board Member Bade, and I know item number 3, under the suggested topics, suggested by Board Member Sweat, kind of covers that, but
Okay.
I think what I'm hearing you say is let's kind of evaluate and assess how our initial, I guess, first round in 20 years of school closure went, what changes could or should be made,
right?
How we do this, and then, of course, the element
right.
of building utilization
Yep.
that we kind of touched on tonight. Just go a
Absolutely.
little more in depth in that.
That's great. Yep.
I'll make that note. Any other thoughts? Okay, so we can't fit all of these things into a 4-hour retreat. So if you trust Bryce and I to, based on this short conversation, and we can do some follow-up individually with folks too, between now and when we finalize this agenda, what I'd like to do is to be able to present a final draft agenda to the board at our next meeting, and hopefully finalize that in anticipation of our retreat in June. So if there are other things on this agenda, list of topics, suggested topics, please reach out to Bryce and I, and we want to hear what you're thinking and what works for you. I will say that the one thing that I had mentioned about, utilizing in a different space or a different time as our evaluation processes for the superintendent and BA, we've kind of ironed out some of those elements in our closed sessions, and I think maybe that until we have a finalized process and criteria, that might be where it needs to stay. But nonetheless, we're open to your guys' feedback about where we go. Good. All right. Thank you. We'll be in. Oh, Brian.
So in order to determine what we actually come up with, are you going to send out like a ranking or like a survey, or how are we going to come up with?
Yeah.
I think we got to have a plan on how we're going to decide
the ranking
topics.
Definitely works. I think hearing your feedback as you get a chance to sit with these for a little bit longer, and then our thought was the individual conversations with each of you about what works and what doesn't offline, and then I think that would help us determine, but we could certainly look into a ranking system as well if that works for the board. Yeah. Ranking. Okay. Cool. Bryce and I will develop that process for us and still reach out individually. Okay. Thank you so much for that. And we'll make sure that the sheet that you have in front of you with the additional topics is also presented in our minutes, so the public can have a chance to see what we're talking about there as well. All right. Moving to the action agenda. We don't have any items there. Superintendent's report.
Yep, I have a couple of items, housekeeping items, just to let people know. When we last were in board meeting, the board voted not to approve the Washington ELP pilot going forward, and I'm saying this just to make sure this is on the public record. In terms of our next steps, as superintendent, I put forth a proposal to grandfather that program out so that we wouldn't be bringing in any new students, but we would not end it abruptly. So The plan was to have 5th and 6th graders continue, and then in the next year, the 5th graders will be 6th graders, and then the program will end. I wanted that on the public record that I had wanted that as the grandfathering out plan for the program, and then in individual conversations with the board had your assent to move in that direction. So I appreciate that. So we can serve the students who are there now and not move them out of the program. The other thing, there's a lot of conversation going around about start and end times for schools and recesses and such, and I just want to clarify that the district is not limiting recesses in the district. There is some confusion about that because the state office actually limits the number of minutes within a recess that can be counted toward instructional time. But there is no attempt to limit recesses in schools, so I want to make that clear, just having heard a number of comments like that. Also, I want to add something tonight, having just read an editorial. The HB 257. Sorry, I knew otherwise known as the bathroom bill. I want to apologize for any pain or discomfort that were created in our attempts to follow the law and to serve our students. It is a law that I am brokenhearted about. I said early on in this district that I am proud to lead a district that is inclusive and welcoming. And I think that is the nature of who we are as Salt Lake City, and I believe this through my bones, that that's what we should be. It matters a great deal to me, and I really am quite saddened that our attempts both to comply with the law, which we've had to do, but also to serve students and to care for students who are put in really fairly untenable positions with this, that in rolling that out in a way that we thought was actually providing really important information to students who we haven't identified would be impacted by the law. There are a number of students that we know would be impacted by the law, but there are a number that we don't. And I'm grateful that Salt Lake is a district that welcomes people, and so they choose to come here to be in a district that has this stance toward difference. So my apologies that didn't go better. I think what it says to us is that there may be even more complicated bills coming out next year from the legislature. I have heard that this is not ending anytime soon, that it is worth opening up the conversation about implementation and how we best roll out communications to a broader community. So that's my effort going forward, and I just wanted to share that.
Thank you, Superintendent. We appreciate the heartfelt report that you mentioned to us tonight, and I can speak individually and probably for collectively that I think we're all here and love our district because of that element of inclusivity that we have. And so I appreciate you taking that stand publicly, and your apologies for that too. You know, it's a tough spot to be in, that we're in.
It's a bad one.
But nonetheless, I appreciate your advocacy.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We do have a need for a business administrator report. Alan.
As if you haven't heard enough from me yet. Two things. First, I want to give you an update on SPA, so the Salt Lake School for the Performing Arts Charter School. If you remember, the district is their current charter authorizer, and we informed them over a year ago that we would not be authorizing them beyond the end of this year. So they have developed a plan where they are going to request from the state charter board that their charter be taken over by Canyon Grove Academy, which is a charter school out of Pleasant Grove. They're going to present that to the state charter board this Thursday in their meeting, and barring any board disagreement, General Counsel and I will write a letter to the state office and state charter board saying that we support this move. So if anyone, speak now, forever hold your peace. Perfect. Next thing I want to update you on, so last month in April, the Spring UASBO conference was held, UASBO, Utah Association of School Business Officials. I just want to give you an update of some of the things we talked there. It was a 2-day conference held in Provo. I want to highlight, we had, it's a chance for the state board people to come. They've now digested the legislative session and be able to kind of give us some financial happenings of what it all meant at the end of the day. So I just want to highlight some of the things they talked about. So currently there's a program called Teacher Salary Supplement Program where the legislature provides additional funds for teachers who have a specific degree like a math degree or science degree, I believe special education, and they apply to the state and the state funds that. For beginning fiscal year 26, so not next year but the year after, that program will be changing. And it will be called, let's see, let me find it here. It'll be called the Salary Supplement for Highly Needed Educators. Those funds will then be allocated to LEAs based on a per student allocation. So during the next year, the district needs to determine which positions are those highly needed positions and how will we disperse those funds to those positions. So you'll probably be hearing discussions of that over the next year so we can be ready to implement that in 25-26. Also note beginning in fiscal year 26, so 25-26 is a big year, LEAs can no longer charge a secondary student a fee for curricular activity or co-curricular activity that is required for the instruction of established course standards with some exceptions. So again, we're going to be discussing over the next year with the ability for a high school to charge a fee for curricular and co-curricular activities. How do we replace those fundings? There is some one-time funding allocated by the legislature to help the LEAs kind of grandfather off that, but they're one time. So at a certain point, we need to determine how are we going to create a funding source to permanently replace those fees. Also of note, the legislature had allocated, this is actually last year, but I think some people forget, in the flexible allocation, there is an additional 2% WPU increase that's been set aside in the event that the constitutional amendment passes in November. They will release that 2%. So just keep that in mind. Not that we're supporting the constitutional amendment, but I just wanted to keep that on your radar. We talked about the safety bill. So funding for Beverly Taylor Sorensen, the funding model for that has changed. The legislation required the state office to generate a level, even dollar amount for every LEA to receive. Right now, it's a percentage of the Beverly Taylor Sorensen teacher salary. It'll be a flat amount across the state, and that amount for next year is $71,742.03. That includes both salary and benefits. So what that means for the Salt Lake School District is we're going to be kicking in quite a bit more money into the BTS program. Our budget that I showed you up there includes $300,000 additional money to keep the same BTS teachers that we currently have. Just so you note, I volunteered to be on a committee that's starting up at the end of this month to look at that calculation and give suggestions to the state board on what that amount should be. So I'll keep you posted on that. Also for Board Member Anderson, just so you know, so we had Kirsten Swinyard. She spoke to the business administrators about housing and transit reinvestment zones, HTRZs, because they're a relatively new way to divert property tax growth from school districts to development. And so she's very well versed in it, and we invited her to come talk to the BAs throughout the state, just so they're aware of this new method of funding development through property tax increments. And then, last but not least, John Larson did a presentation on just to help BAs, and I just want to quote his great words. It's actually a joke. What happens when you lock a wild hyena and accountant in a room? The hyena stops laughing.
Thank you, Alan. I appreciate that. All right, moving on. I don't know how we're going to top that joke there, Alan. But board member reports. We'll start with Board Member Sika, if you have anything to report on.
Sure, I do. I'm just reporting this because I see James Yapias in the corner of the room and he hasn't left, so I need to get it out there before he does leave. Just a heads up, I attended a track and field event that was at the Ron McBride, new Ron McBride field at Glendale Middle School, where all these middle schools came and competed against each other. The energy was great, the vibe was great, the support was great. But one thing that was a downfall is there's no restrooms there for people to utilize. You know, these kids have to go into the schools, and there's actually been a few episodes where people are not using those restrooms. So I have been persuaded from Glendale Middle School to get the district on board to get them restrooms and snack bars at this track and field place, because that would be a huge benefit, a huge resource for the community, because it's being utilized well. And thanks, Yapias, for listening. He was nodding. But I also attended my daughter's, they do this every year, Ballet West performance for fifth graders who are moving on, and it was held up at Highland High School, and this is my second child who's actually been through that. And remember, we dance, but we dance a different kind of way, and seeing her in this light of this type of performance, I didn't think that she was, going to hang with it, because it's alternative dancing. We do hip-hop or Polynesian culture dancing, but this kind of dance she was actually pretty good. And the kids there were pretty great. And so I just wanted to give kudos and a shout out. I don't know who necessarily runs this, but it's such a great program for these kids, especially on the west side, to have an opportunity to participate in a culture such as that we don't usually get an opportunity to do so. So I just wanted to share that great event, and thank you for those people who spend their time in teaching these young kids at different kinds of forms of dancing and creative art, and the need for us to have more of that. That's it. Thank you.
Well, first of all, thank you to SLEA leadership and having the teachers be here today. It really speaks. I'm a firm believer in representation, because, without it, rights will be stomped on. And I really appreciate that. But throughout the week, I've been receiving texts also from parents and some people from our district who are like, is it true that our district is going to take away the authority from SCC schools, SIC, and schools' ability to make change of plans, make change of schedules, and so. And to that I say, it is rumor. There is nothing in there. I just want to let everyone know in our district, if there is anything, you're going to hear us talk about it here. And if I do not know, I beg of you that you contact me. You have my cell phone number. Contact me directly. And if I do not know the answer, I will make sure to get an answer, because I am a firm believer in the importance of a community. This is why this is called public schools. This is not a private school. Everyone in the community and in the district and in the school is involved in the process of moving this machine forward. And I look forward to continue to learn from the community as well. One more thing is I've been also receiving a lot of complaints from students, from parents actually, of students at elementary school. They heard so many times N-word flying around. I want to urge the parents who are listening to please talk to your kids and let them know what is a derogatory term. Let them know what is not proper to say to others. Let them know what is really, why we should not say that, basically. It is just so sad. It is heartbreaking to see that. And I want to also, Superintendent, I want to urge you that you go ahead and ask those superintendents, the principals, and teachers, if they hear anything of such being reported, it has to go directly and taken care of immediately. It should not be floating around in any way whatsoever. We got enough hatred in this world. We got enough, I'm going to start swearing. I'm not allowed to. So there is a lot already in our plate. And I beg of you that those little kiddos, they are the future. They are the ones we are relying on to be able to, make this country really wonderful as it is. Okay? I beg of you that you pass that on. And I just want to say thank you also to all the parents of those schools who are closing for your patience. I know we are not perfect in doing the process, but nevertheless, I have a full trust in our superintendent and her administration in making sure that things are coming along slowly. This is our first time after 20 years of closing a certain number of schools, so give us a benefit of the doubt as we move along. We are here to learn so we can better the next process. And I just want to say thank you again. Thank you.
Vice President Williams?
Yeah, I have a couple of things. First, like many of my colleagues, I wanted to recognize Teacher Appreciation Week and thank the teachers that are still here in the room. If it wasn't for the teachers that I had in my life, I wouldn't be where I am today, so genuine thanks for that. Also, with that, seeing the group is here, one of my former student leaders is now a teacher in our district, and in the area that I work in, we teach a lot about advocacy and community organizing, so I was proud to see her out here tonight. Along with teachers, we did recognize Sarah Posey as Teacher of the Year. Did want to mention that Sarah is from Precinct 1, so I have to give a highlight to that. Two other things. One, I kind of talk about this every time I give an update, but tomorrow morning is the last Raptor ride with Rose Park Elementary, and I'm excited to be out there in the cold with them tomorrow morning to bike to school. It's going to be great. And then the other thing I wanted to highlight is this weekend, Saturday, I had the opportunity to attend the third annual Native American Youth Day at Rose Park Elementary. I've been able to attend all three that have been in existence, and it's a highlight I look forward to every year. But wanted to give special recognition to Suzanne Arthur, Gail Dawes, Nicole Palmer, and all the staff at Rose Park Elementary. It was I wasn't able to stay the entire time, but the hour and a half that I was there was really great. So thank you.
Student Board Member Evans?
Sorry, okay. I also just wanted to say happy Teacher Appreciation Week, and especially to my mother. She's the best teacher I know. I'm very biased. And then also as well to my grandma, Miss Bryson. She's also the best. And then other than that, my favorite holiday is this month, which is the last day of school. So congrats, we made it last month.
Board Member Anderson?
Yes, we have not had a finance committee meeting since our last open meeting, so I don't have updates, but I did want to mention that I had spoken with Brian about his concerns from the last meeting, and we'll work on addressing with all of you the way you can more clearly know what items on the agenda have passed through our committee. It's really clear when a policy has passed through the policy committee, but not as clear when an item's been discussed in finance. So that's something I hope to address. The RDA subcommittee discussed the implications of potential tax increment financing, called TIF, as part of the proposed sports and entertainment districts in the city, which are being discussed tonight. So I wanted to add that Christy Hart left the meeting early because it's my understanding she was delivering the concerns of that subcommittee in tonight's meeting. And I'm happy to discuss with anyone the conversations we've had in our subcommittee about our concerns with the growing popularity of TIF for the city's development needs. We had our last Human Sexuality Committee meeting and reviewed curriculum on healthy relationships from a group at Utah State. And our final report, as you know, was on the consent agenda. And the report was factual and complete, but I did want to address that parent member attendance was generally low. And so I would strongly encourage us to look at what about the meeting times or modalities are not working for parents, as we really need their ongoing engagement for that committee. And next, I would typically offer the spring pleasantries that everyone has about our fabulous art nights, winning athletic seasons, and important club events. But to me, it feels really wrong to celebrate when our queer community is facing so much harm from the state legislature, but also, as the superintendent mentioned, some of the actions in our district. I want to say that since joining the board last winter, I've tried to speak my views and the views of my constituents, but never undermine necessary, if controversial, actions taken by the district. And when hard decisions have been made, I have tried to be diplomatic, reasoned, and really supportive. But our implementation of HB 257 really has left me disappointed and unsettled, to the point that I want to make a comment for the board and staff to consider moving forward. And I make this comment with appreciation for the note of apology from our superintendent. And I could accept that apology and move on, but I do feel the need to record my sincerely held concerns so we can learn from this experience moving forward. We're the only district in the state of Utah that required students to hear presentations on the bill, despite state statutes' ongoing conflict with federal guidance in Title IX. And I hope that decision did not set a precedent to present on any hateful whim of the legislature. I'm concerned that instead of being forward-thinking and expanding the number of all-gender restrooms in our buildings, we reacted to the bill, and I worry this was to the detriment primarily of our district's queer community. The queer community and allies asked district leaders to reconsider our decision-making about how to implement this bill, and that did not happen. I'm concerned about the responses I've continued to hear from children who now feel emboldened to police one another's gender in my children's schools and the schools of their friends. I'm concerned that the current approach put administrators in a position without tools to follow up on the presented content, without risking missteps in existing human sexuality and health education statute and rule, where they would have to further instruct on what sex and gender mean in relationship to your birth certificate and bathroom access. Because my ask to have this discussed in a subcommittee was not possible, my board report is the only way I can share my disappointment on behalf of impacted students and the staff in our care. So I implore all of us to reflect on the impacts of these decisions, and in the future, consider letting queer leaders lead out on the issues which impact them. I think we should learn from our mistakes and move forward with growing affirmation and care for those who were harmed.
Board Member Jensen?
Yes. Well, first of all, Ashley reported that there hasn't been any activity on the Finance Committee. There hasn't been any activity with the Policy Committee that I would report on as well. I also wanted to, as a teacher, recognize you teachers and express my gratitude for all you do. And I speak from personal experience. I thank you for taking care of the children in the Salt Lake City School District. I do need to report on one of my assignments, and that is your representative to USBA. I was at a JLC meeting today, and one of the things that I just want you to understand, because there have been several controversial pieces of legislation that have been presented this last session, it has created some challenges in the Joint Legislative Committee, and those individuals are trying to work to make sure that we can work together and work through our differences and respect one another and treat each other with dignity. Having said that, we have a pre-delegate. I told you about that in our previous board meeting in April. We have a pre-delegate, well, the delegate assembly is on June 8th, and there's a pre-delegate meeting on June 7th. On June 7th, it's from 6 to 8 p.m. As your elected representative to JLC, I will be there, but I also know that we have two other delegates, and that would be Ashley and Bryce, or not Bryce, Nate, excuse me. I saw you nodding, Nate, and then it made me say, or I saw Bryce nodding, and it made me say...
You're not the only one that gets us mixed up.
Okay, well, anyway. I'm asking that all three of us are there because we are going to be representing this board. In light of that, I think that it's really important that in our next meeting that we have as a part of our agenda an opportunity to talk about the priorities that the JLC is bringing to the delegate assembly so that the board can tell us how they want us to represent them in that meeting. It seems to me that we need to have that conversation, and the next board meeting is the only opportunity we'll have before. So I would suggest that we have some time allocated for that on our next agenda. I will also be attending the executive committee meeting this Friday. I think that I told you that I was asked to participate on that, so I am now meeting with the leadership of the Utah School Board Association and representing the large school districts in that committee. After that report, I do want to celebrate all of the wonderful things that are happening in our schools. I mean, I'm reflecting on my time as a teacher, but also my time as a parent. This is a wonderful time to celebrate the successes and the accomplishments of students this year. I know that there have been numerous art nights. I think that Bonneville and Uinta and Beacon Heights have already had theirs. Indian Hills has theirs Thursday night. I think Dilworth has theirs Thursday night as well. But then there's also opportunities, and maybe Christy is going to talk about this, but I think it's really wonderful that Highland High, they are hosting this state orchestra festival. I think that's really great that our district is the one that will be hosting all of those orchestras from around the state. It's a great way to end the year.
Thank you. Christy?
I think that the celebrations that go on at the end of the year are just so much fun, aren't they? I mean, it's fun to be able to go to the different things and see our committed parents and our students to our district. I think that one of the things that has resonated with me over this past year is, as I've moved through my NSBA obligations, one of the things I'm very grateful for are the state associations that continue to support NSBA. And I think it behooves us to always be conscientious, and thoughtful about the parents who have stayed with us. That they believe in Salt Lake District, they haven't, chosen a different school to take their kids to, that they continue to populate our school buildings. And I think that also is our responsibility as a board to be looking at our relationship with our city. And, we talked a little bit about this. Ashley touched on it, with the TIF. But I think that as we have concerns rise, that we need to talk to our counterparts on our city council. I appreciate that Sarah Young reached out to me tonight. Both Ashley and I sent a message, to our city council people about some of our concerns, and that we're hoping that we'll be able to meet with them. As we move through this, I think that there's a correlation between our city and our schools. I mean, there just is. And I think that that partnership needs to continue to be built upon instead of us doing our business and them doing their business and thinking that never in between, we'll meet. So I wanted to thank Alan and Ashley and Mohammed, for the great work that's going on in the Finance Committee around this subject, and appreciated Christy Hart taking the time to go down and speak for us tonight. I think that was really important. I think that, Brian mentioned that it's important as we move through the legislative process with USBA and UASBO and with the Superintendent's Association, that we really do understand what those legislative priorities are. I think that taking time in our next meeting, to do a orientation, or basically the legislative priorities will be out for this next year, probably in this next week, but to prep our delegates, for the delegate assembly. I think that one of the things that is allowed in the bylaws of USBA is for a local board to present a letter to the officers and to USBA if we feel like there's an agenda item that we'd like to have on there. And as Brian and I have talked about this, and Ashley's been at those meetings, as many of you have also been, along with our superintendent and our BA, Mr. Kearsley, that there's a growing unrest about SJR 10 and the amendment that they're asking to have abolished from our Constitution in regards to how income tax is spent. So what we'd like to do is ask if you feel comfortable with this, because it would be due tomorrow, is for us to ask for that specific agenda item to be on the delegate assembly. All of us feel as though that it's beyond the JLC's view at this point, because it's changed so much and because the conditional pieces have not been met, that we would like it to go towards the delegate assembly and be discussed there. And then the delegates would make a decision on what the stance would be of support, no support, oppose of SJR 10 going forward. So I talked to Brian and Ashley about this earlier. Ashley's willing to write just a paragraph, one paragraph, just saying that we'd like to see this on the agenda for the delegate assembly. And that at that point, at our next meeting, knowing what the priorities are, we'd be able to prep everybody who's going to be going, who actually is, voting, our voting delegates for that assembly. And then at that point, once the delegate assembly makes a decision, then that's what the decision is. And hopefully as our SJR 10, at that point, we'll know where we're headed with it. Instead of this, as Brian has described, there's a division, that's happened within the Joint Legislative Committee. So if you feel really like, nope, we don't want to do that, but if you feel okay about that, then Ashley would draft something, send it out so that all of us could see it, but it just would need to be sent in by tomorrow if that's something that we'd like to see on the agenda at the delegate assembly, which I feel like I've heard that a little bit, but that would be something that if everyone feels okay about. All right, then we'll go ahead and get that sent out to all of us, superintendent, and obviously put you and Alan on that so that we could see that, and then get that sent out to leadership at USBA tomorrow so that could be on. I think there's other districts that are doing that also, so it won't just be Salt Lake District that's asking for the agenda item to be on there. Lastly, I would just like to say that, when we have issues that come up in our schools, and there's, like at Beacon Heights this morning when there's questions, I actually really appreciate my community reaching out to me. I would much rather them send an email or a text or even call me, instead of just letting it germinate, fester. That's a really good. And, as superintendent, I appreciate you saying right head on, about the recess piece, because that certainly has been something that we've all been hearing about. I don't know where it started, how it started, but it was district-wide and it was a muck. And I think that, but sometimes I think our constituents, especially as an elected official, are hesitant, to call because they're upset. They don't really know what the situation is. But I have really appreciated those calls that I've gotten, not only from my parents in my own precinct, but across the district, and also from teachers in the district that have been asking questions. So I hope you continue to do that. That's what we're here for. We're that conduit at times between the superintendent or the district. That's why we're an elected official from our precincts. It's not something that everybody likes to do, but it's something that all of us are doing. And so we need to continue to do that. So I just want to thank my community for reaching out to me as soon as they heard that and started asking questions, and allowed the superintendent to then circle back and provide some information to me, which then I was able to send out to my parents that were asking questions. So thank you. I appreciate that. That's really all I have. Thanks.
Thank you, Christy. I have just a really brief report, but before I get to that, one, thank you, Brian and Christy, for making the suggestion for that kind of orientation, or that type of training in preparation for the JLC meeting. That's something Bryce and I have agreed to, and we'll be working with Alan or B.A. Kersley and Superintendent Grant. We have some time set aside early next week to kind of relook at our agenda that we developed an agenda setting a couple weeks ago, and so we'll get that out to everybody as well. So thank you for that suggestion. I know it's something we wanted to do last year, and I'm glad that we were able to do it this year. I think just the other piece with that letter, I'm really glad that you brought that up to Christy, and if you can get that to us, we can make sure that it's on district letterhead and all those things. And
I'll have Ashley do that. She agreed to draft something for us, and then she'll send that out.
And Bryce and I will make sure to send that out to everybody when we get that and get it on our letterhead.
And I will report that in the executive committee meeting as well.
Great. So we'll,
I will
as
report
long
that
as
on
it's
Friday to
sent out
them.
by close of day tomorrow.
Okay. Perfect. So thank you for both of those things. Those are both really important, especially with the significance of something like SJR 10 and what that can mean for funding for our students in schools and teachers and everybody that's involved in our schools. Mine is an appreciation to teachers as well, so thank you, teachers who stuck it out. James and Mike, I know you always do. Thank you for being here. I can't say enough about educators in my life as well. There's educators in my family. My tia Trini and her husband, my Uncle Bob, were both in the Granite School District system for their whole careers, and I got to give a shout out to, I think, the teacher that had the biggest impact in my life, Dr. Terry Razan, who was actually the special ed teacher, and I was one of her peer tutors, and she advocated for me to be in that program as a peer tutor probably longer than I should have been, but nonetheless, it was really the glue that kept me attached to East, as I was certainly not a traditional student, and thank the stars, thank you stars, that Terry was also the credit recovery teacher who helped me get through graduation in 2004, 20 years ago. I don't think that I would have the opportunities that I have now in my life if it weren't for Terry looking after me, and all the other teachers in our district that shepherded me along the way, and in other districts that I participated in school in here in Utah. So thank you, teachers, for all that you do, and thank you for letting me be honest that I was a struggling student. And I think it's a big deal for folks to know that, and I'm not shy from letting that be known. So thank you, teachers, for all that you do. That concludes our board member reports. We do have a need to re-enter closed session, and I'll entertain a motion.
I move that the board re-enter closed executive session to discuss the character, professional competence, or physical mental health of an individual and collective bargaining. Those are the only two, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we have a motion and a
Oh,
second.
no, I said the wrong thing. I'm going to say it again.
Okay, restate the motion.
Scratch that. I move that on, I'm just going to, yes. I move that on May 7th, 2024, the board re-enter closed executive session to discuss the character, professional competence, or physical or mental health of an individual, pending or reasonably imminent litigation, and collective bargaining, and that we adjourn the meeting following the conclusion of closed session.
Second.
All right, any discussion to the motion? Seeing none, we'll start with a roll call vote with Board Member Anderson.
Ashley Anderson, yes.
Nate Salazar, yes.
Mohammed.
Mohammed, you have to vote.
Yes.
Ryan Jensen, yes.
Christy Sweat, yes.
Bryce Williams, yes.
Jenny Sika, yes.
Excellent. Thank you, community and public, for joining us this evening, and we'll prepare the room for closed session.
Yes.
He's like waving to his fans.
Come on, you guys. Let me socialize while I have a minute.
I don't